Thank you all and welcome to the Savannah Book Festival. My name is Ivy Council and I am a volunteer member of the Board of Directors for SBF. If you've attended a festival in the past, you know that it is extraordinary for a board member to take time to stand between you and your favorite author. So, so the circumstances are, in fact, extraordinary, and that's the reason I'm standing before you. As we all know, the cost of nearly everything in our lives has gone up recently. Probably many of you have felt the impact of inflation. I'm here to tell you that it has also impacted SBF. Nearly 90% of the festival's income, as mentioned earlier, comes from donations and many of you have donated. Over the last 16 years, that has allowed us to maintain a Saturday festival-free environment. In order to continue that, we will need to reach out to our donors and our participants and ask that, to the extent that you are motivated, to seek out and find those yellow buckets and to make a donation. You can also do it via Venmo, and that's on the back. If you turn to the back of your program, there's a QR code there that you can use in order to make a donation. If you enjoy the festival, and most people do, we want to continue to maintain a Saturday that's free to the community and everybody can come out and enjoy their favorite authors. So find those yellow buckets throughout the day and dig deep and give as much as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. Now, Jonathan has also promised to leave a few minutes for questions at the end of his talk. We ask that you wait for a microphone before you ask your question so everyone can hear it. Johnathon Scott Barrett is with us today, courtesy of Linda and Belle Diarment. Jonathan Scott Barrett is a very interesting guy, I've learned in 5 minutes. He is a 7th-generation Georgian with a deep appreciation for the history, foodways, and culture of the South. And I think his parties in Savannah were legendary, with his 500 glasses I've heard he has. His first book, Rise and Shine, is a memoir spanning several decades of Southern farm-to-table traditions. In his second book, Cook and Tell, he narrates another delicious culinary sojourn across Dixie, where he includes not only his own entertaining stories and recipes, but those of friends he met along the way. His latest work, Cook and Celebrate, a collection of Southern holiday and party traditions, further explores the tastes and traditions of the South with recipes and tales. He also spent 10 years as a James Beard Foundation restaurant judge. However, he's really a CPA by profession, which I don't get, and a nonprofit executive. His resume includes work with Junior Achievement and the Georgia 4-H Foundation. He currently serves as Director of Development for the State Botanical Garden at UGA. And now, let's give a warm Savannah welcome to Jonathan Scott Barrett.
Thank you. Do you all know the difference between a northern fairy tale and a southern fairy tale? Okay. Well, a northern fairy tale starts off with, once upon a time, while a southern fairy tale begins with, y'all just ain't gonna believe this. But Southerners, we love our stories and our tall tales just as much as we love our food. And to anyone from the South, the food of our region and of our childhood especially, it has a special place in our minds and our hearts. And it's, no matter how far we roam away from home, that affinity for the wonderful recipes that came out of our family's kitchens and the stories that accompany them, they stay with us. Eugene Walter, in the 1971 book American Cooking, Southern Style, relates this example of our lifelong love of Southern foodways. On a summer's evening some years ago, two of the South's most celebrated writers, William Faulkner and Catherine Ann Porter, were dining together at a plush restaurant in Paris. A splendid meal had been consumed, a bottle of fine Burgundy emptied, a thimble-sized glasses of expensive liqueur had been drained. "Back home, the butter beans are in," said Faulkner, peering into the distance. "The speckled ones." Miss Porter fiddled with her glass and stared into space and whispered, "Blackberries." There's our love of dining, too, and all things Epicurean. Damon Lee Fowler, fabulous Southern cookbook writer, someone that I turn to for advice and guidance. He's written over a dozen cookbooks. He's quoted as saying, "Southerners love to tell stories, and our favorite stories always seem to involve food. If there isn't actually food in our mouths, we're talking about it, what we just ate, what we're going to eat at the moment, and what we plan on eating next." And I can attest to that. I talk to my best friend that I grew up with since 7th grade every day on the phone mostly. And if it's in the afternoon, you know, the conversation is like, "What'd you have for lunch?" You know, "What you gonna do for supper?" So it's always in our conversations. And then we Southerners, we're so descriptive as well. I mean, we use adjectives to describe other adjectives. We're flowery, you know, and expansive in our prose. And emphasizing my train of thought here is John Barrett, the famed author of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Y'all might have heard of that book. Midnight, which is popularly called, was Barrett's first novel. Y'all, it was published in 1994, debuted on New York Times bestseller list, and it stayed there for 216 weeks. The longest-standing bestseller on record for the newspaper. And he made this observation about Southern writers here at the Savannah Book Festival, and I paraphrase, "Most authors would write," now why did I have that up there? I'm sorry, pardon me. "Most authors would write, 'Susan went to the closet to get her coat.' However, those from the South would relate, 'Susan walked through the impressive oak-paneled entrance hall of her Tuxedo Road mansion to the coat closet, where she retrieved a full-length black mink, a present from her third husband, Chandler Prescott Madison, on their 3rd anniversary.'" So, which one of those two passages do you like better? What I've tried to do in my books, and I attempted to do, is showcase that intersection of our love of food and the food created in our kitchens, and then those sweeping stories about that food that we tell in our dining rooms and panel libraries and front porches across the South. My books are what you would probably call in a genre Southern food memoirs, or maybe Southern culinary narratives. 2 reviews of my work attest to that definition. Read them kind of quickly. "Cook and Celebrate" is utterly delicious. The family stories and recipes shared are spiced with humor and sweetened by memories. Reading it, I felt like I was sitting on Jonathan's front porch. Another one was "A certified Southern gentleman and engaging storyteller, Jonathan has woven together a wonderful collection of not only recipes, but the stories behind them." So that's the way that my books go. There will be as many photos of people and stories in my books as there are recipes, and in each of the books they average 150 recipes, so there's a good bit. I'm so very happy to be here at the Savannah Book Festival. I was on the board many years ago with some of the founding members like Lisa White that's here, Matt Pickett. I thought I saw Matt, but I'm not sure. So it's an honor to be here, to be a part of this group, and to be back. I'm especially happy to be presenting here in the Nice's auditorium, and the picture that you see here is of Grace and Jack Nice's, the donors that made this auditorium possible. That's at my 40th birthday party. And Jack and Grace were just wonderful, fabulous people. I have to tell you a cute story about them. I had another dinner party years later, and it was a German theme, and I had made sauerbraten and braised red cabbage and spätzle, all these things. Well, the Niceys are a very proud German heritage, and they both showed up to the party in lederhosen, and so it was just great. I've got a fabulous recipe in that particular chapter too. I'm talking about Southern, my take on some of the Southern food, but in the German spin. Is a cream of white bean soup, and you cook white cannellini beans or white northern beans with a mirepoix, some chicken stock, ham hock. Drain it, take the juice out, take those beans, puree it, and then add cream in with it, and then it is just this magnificent, smooth, beautiful, very simple, basically a peasant dish that's been dressed up just a little bit. It's wonderful. Now, Cook and Celebrate's been a national progression for me in terms of writing. My first book was Rise and Shine, as you see here. I wrote that book as a result of hosting a supper club at my house called Girls on the Grill. This was back in 2013. My friend Monica, who's with us here today, was slated to host her book club at her home, but her house is undergoing restoration. Contractors weren't yet finished. We all know how that goes. So she asked me if we'd have them at their house, and I said I would be happy to do so. And they asked that I share some recipes and stories from some of my favorites. And here's a picture of 3 of the founding members here of the Girls on the Grill. Monica on the left, Debbie Keeney in the middle, and my dear friend too, Elizabeth Skeetus on the right. There's a whole chapter in Cook and Tell of Elizabeth's mother's recipes from a small town in North Carolina, which is fabulous. And I have an entire chapter in Cook and Celebrate on supper clubs, and there are recipes from these 3 ladies within that. My mother had died just a few months before the supper club meeting, and that was really devastating to me. Lost my father several years before that. 2 of my aunts had died that year. I was in a very, I was in grief. And as I started thinking about the stories and the things that I wanted to write and to share with people, my mind kept going back to those things that my mother would cook and my family would cook and the stories behind them. And I wanted to be very careful about what I said to the ladies, because 30 of them attending the house. Talking about my mom and then my father. This picture of my mother on her 80th birthday, and at the Savannah Yacht Club, the poster there is a picture of her engagement photo to my dad. That's my dad and myself in the front yard in Perry, Georgia. I was 4 years old back then. So what the result that night of the supper club dinner was a number of recipes and stories, and the ladies in the club said, these are really very good, and then you should continue with this. I had a big gap in my life at that point. I've been a caregiver for my mother. I was, while I still was a professional, had a career, spent so much time caring for her, I spent that other time writing and put this together and came up with a book that resulted in Rise and Shine. The way that book got its name was the fact that we were doing farm-to-table food before that became a saying. We grew our own vegetables. We picked our own fruit. We put them up, as you would say. And I was one of the main non-hired hands that had to do all that. And my father would come bursting into my bedroom before dawn on summer mornings, flip on the lights, sling the door open, and sing out Rise and Shine and Give God Your Glory. And he would walk away just snickering and laughing because he knew, and excuse my language, it has pissed me off. And, you know, I was a teenager, and that was not the way I wanted to spend my day, was out picking okra with long sleeves and long trousers on. You could wring sweat out of my shirt when I got home. Not a pretty picture, but anyway, how I hated it then, but how I missed my parents, and I would give anything to be back picking tomatoes with them in the July heat. Now, with that book came a book tour. I went over 7 states and 20 cities. And so many of the people told me at these different places about their own stories and what they had as memories. And what I decided to do then was to create an anthology, not only of my stories and recipes, but that of other friends, and that came to the being of Cook and Tell. Went on another promotional junket for this book, and same sort of thing. People were sharing with me all the time about their love of food and family and friends and how they all related. And I found that so many of them were about the holidays. And anyway, there was just so many of them. I could have written a whole book just on the culinary traditions of Christmas by itself, but that collection came about, and that's how we have, or I have now, and you all have, hopefully every one of you will have, and your family and friends, and then going forward through the next year, through the holidays and birthdays, that you can buy these off eShaver Books here and Amazon. As for the recipes, I chose them in two ways. First of all, I outlined this book with the chapters that I wanted to have and the recipes that I wanted to include into them. And then what I did is, after that, was I reached out on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. I said, out to friends, what is it that makes the holiday special to you and why? Share some of those recipes and stories. The easy part was getting all of those together. The hard part was trying to decide what I could not include, because the publisher only allows me so many pages. So I put in the introduction to the book, if you think that there's some dishes that should be here, I probably would agree with you, but I just didn't have the space for it. Here's a photo of Craig Claiborne. As I go about talking about Cook and Celebrate today, his philosophy that he has in this quote is very close to what I try to do within my books, and I think that you'll get the feel of that. And you can read it for yourselves. I don't have to read that. But the thing about Craig, he was from this tiny town of Sunflower, Mississippi. I mean, 1,500 people that are there. And then he went on to have such an incredible career in New York and across the globe as a food critic and chef and author. And he was very good friends with Albert Stoddard here, and would visit Savannah over the years ago. Today I'm going to talk first about... and I got to hurry, because it can take me 15 minutes to tell you how to make a pitcher iced tea, and I only have just a limited amount of time. So anyway, upcoming holidays, we have Mardi Gras, we have St. Patrick's Day, and also Easter. And then I'm going to try to zip through some other pieces we have. Mardi Gras translates to mean Fat Tuesday, in French, and it was a time to eat all the fatty food in the house before Lent arrived, and the abstinence and fasting. In the United States, it started in Mobile, I think sometime around 1703. And my book, since it's about memories and friends mixed with food, one of my favorite Mardi Gras dishes is gumbo. And each time I prepare that stew, I think about two of my dear friends who've passed away. And again, you'll see more pictures of people than food and my things. You'll see here, those of you from Savannah that know these two folks. Those of you who don't, let me introduce you to them. Elizabeth Oxnard on the left. Elizabeth, native of Mobile, Alabama. She was a banker. Her late husband, Ben, was an executive in the sugar industry. Their ties to sugar go back to the 1700s. They were generous philanthropists here in Savannah. Sam on the right, also from here, and also had a big farm and home, cattle farm up in Effingham County. His grandfather, Samuel Sr., was the founder of United Fruit Company, as we know as Chiquita Banana. And his childhood home is the home of the president of Tulane University now. Now, besides the fact that these two were from the Delta Gulf Coast, both settled in Savannah later in life, they also loved animals. Sam, on his almost a mile winding drive to his house called Honey Ridge, you'd find a menagerie of dogs following along behind you. Maybe three-legged, maybe have one ear, maybe blind, maybe it's whatever, but they were there. Sam could not turn away a stray. Elizabeth was the same. She had all sorts of dogs. One time we went out to visit her. There's a beautiful raised cottage on the Sapelo River on a bend. And got there. She left a note on the door for Tom and I to go upstairs, make ourselves at home. She had to go to the store. Well, I went upstairs, and we were in the kitchen, and there's this big pot of stew cooking. And it's very aromatic, and it looked delicious. And there's a spoon sitting next to it. I stirred it and smelled it, took a taste. I said, oh, this is delicious. Well, she comes into the house, and I'm standing there with a pot, and I said, Elizabeth, I said, you didn't have to cook for us for supper. We were going to take you out for dinner. And she raised an eyebrow, and she was famous for this big eyebrow that go up to the crown of her head. And she pointed at the pot of stew, and she goes, Jonathan, honey, that's for the dogs. Yeah. And another thing that they had in common, they loved my gumbo. And it said that reminded me of their home. Now, I have Mardi Gras in my book through the grace of my friend Mary Martha Green that you see in the picture here. And she is the author of The Cheese Biscuit Queen Tells All. It is fantastic. Mary's book you should read. If you like the genre of book that I'm talking about, and I've given it to some of y'all here in the audience for Christmas. I know that you have a copy, but Mary's here. Mary, stand up and say hey to everybody. So she came to visit me. And you know what she brought me this morning all the way from Beaufort, South Carolina? A tin of cheese biscuits. So there's not enough to share with all you all. I love you, but Mary throws a big shindig with upwards of 200 people in our house with a Mardi Gras theme each year, and she has got some fabulous recipes that she shares with us in that chapter. Shrimp and grit tarts with tasso gravy, these tiny little tarts that are made of grits. Put your thumb in it with an impression, a piece of shrimp on top and tasso gravy, a crawfish spread that's baked in a bread bowl, smoked salmon cheesecake. I have a Mardi Gras salad that's just the color of Mardi Gras that comes in the gumbo. I call it JSB's Gumbo Yaya, and you'll see a picture of that on the right. It's chock full of food. There's not a roux in it. It's just a lot of shrimp and andouille sausage and chicken and all sorts of vegetables, and it's really very, very good. And Elizabeth and Sam, they really loved it. And again, every time I make it or think about gumbo, I think about those two folks. St. Patrick's Day is huge here in Savannah. As you all know, many cities across the South celebrate it, but most well known in Savannah. Known as the hostess city of the South, Savannah earns that moniker, where it hosts over 750,000 people each year for that celebration. The parade is hours long, and it's second only in size to that in New York City. And when you think about proportion of size and population, that's pretty impressive. Now, Savannah is one of the busiest ports in our country. It's a melting pot of people. Founded in 1733, surnames from places across the globe are represented here today. The descendants of those folks climbed the high bluffs, and I don't think I have a pointer, but you see the bluffs that are here. 5 stories that these people came up. And you really can't see it in the tower there, but on the left is the damask tent that General Oglethorpe lived in when he first came. And then when you look to the right, you see something of that view today and what that looks like. The Irish were a large sect of the settlers that came arriving with Georgia founder James Oglethorpe. Actually, our second royal governor, Henry Ellis, was an Irishman, and dates back to 1812, when a handful of prominent Irish residents formed the Hibernian Society to aid poor immigrants that came to this company. Now, Hibernia, as most of you all probably know, is a classical Latin name for Ireland, with the word hibernus meaning cold and wintry. 1824, the president gave a call out to local residents to join he and fellow Hibernians to march after Mass to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and the parade was born. It gets international attention for its party-like atmosphere and all the people that you see in the city drinking green beer and such. But at its heart, it's still a religious and a family affair. The Mass that you see at the Cathedral Basilica of St. John the Baptist, William Jasper here that we're celebrating, Revolutionary War hero, the Celtic Cross. I have more things, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move forward. We're good? Okay, all righty, okay. Family culinary rituals, though, are also found throughout the city, and I'd like to share with those of you, my dear friends, Deanne Mitchell, her mom, Mary Ann Smith. And you see these two lovely ladies here, and they braved the cold this morning too, and so had to come out to see us. So anyway, Mary Ann's both sets of her grandparents were from Ireland. Her father, John Michael Brennan, served for over 40 years as attorney for the Catholic Diocese. He was named a Knight of St. George by Pope John the 23rd, and president of the Hibernian Society, led the St. Patrick's Day as Grand Marshal, Irish roots running very, very deep. Now, they've been doing this meal for many years. Southern Living actually covered it in addition a number of years ago. And all of the recipes that you see here are from them, and they're the classics that you would see during St. Patrick's Day, particularly the corned beef and cabbage, the beef stew with Guinness. And if you look here, I'm not a food photographer, so don't, again, I'm a major gift officer, fundraiser, and such. So. But this is the Guinness with beef. It is magnificent. It is probably one of the best dishes I've had in ages. I just cooked it recently. The secret is you have to braise the beef really, really well. If you don't do it, if you just take the beef and you season it and put it in the pot with the rest of the ingredients, it may get tender, but the taste is not going to be the same. So it takes a little bit of effort, but you have to really brown each of those pieces of beef. Be careful not to crowd the pot to do it. But anyway, the cheesy mashed potatoes, Dan's recipe, it's a fabulous cheese and cream, it's a wonderful accompaniment, and Irish soda bread that you see here. And I'm not a baker, and I made the bread here, so if I could do the baking, I would say there's a crucifix cut in it to let the wee fairies out, and to also to bring them. They also had these wonderful chocolate brownies for dessert during that meal, and made with. How many of y'all make your own homemade brownies? Is this okay? Well, let me give you a hint. Buy yourself a box of Ghirardelli brownie mix. I mean, it is. Yeah, it is the best that you would never be able to tell they weren't homemade. I take the water out of the recipe and substitute espresso or really strong coffee. They're magnificent. So save yourself a bunch of steps, a lot of sifting, a lot of doing things, and do those. I have to tell you a really kind of a funny story here, too. It has nothing to do with Easter, but Mary Ann gave me a recipe for Chatham Artillery Punch a number of years ago, and I was asked to plan an Episcopal diocesan dinner one evening while the convention was being held here in Savannah. And so there was everything, the centerpieces, the food, and the band and the bar. And they said to the bar, the leadership of the diocese, they were like, oh, well, you can have wine and such and maybe some punch. You can have some alcohol in the punch, but no hard liquor. And I was like, oh, okay, I can put punch out. And they're like, sure. And I'm like, okay. So I made Chatham Artillery Punch. Chatham Artillery Punch is a concoction of, it's lethal. It will, excuse my language again, it will kick your ass. I promise you, if you're not careful with it. But it's so smooth, and you finish the top off with a little bit of champagne, and it just goes down so easily. Y'all, by the end of the night, the bishop, priests, lay people were doing the electric slide out on these. They said it was the best they had ever had in terms of a diocesan convention. Speaking of dancing priests, let's move to Easter. So here you have, I'm 6 years old, hunting Easter eggs after church one Sunday at Rigdon's Ponds, Lisa White from Fort Valley. Rigdon's was located between Perry and Fort Valley. I've got a bunch of different recipes that are included in here that you see, and I'll talk about a few in just a moment. But Easter has so many wonderful dishes and things that we like to celebrate. Now here are two of my dear friends, Barbara and Carter Hubbard. They're here with us this morning too, because they want to make sure I didn't say anything untoward about them. Lent's over, it's time to visit the butcher, and leg of lamb. Barbara has this magnificent leg of lamb recipe it's a marinade. It's fabulous. It really is. It's beautiful. When Carter carves it and I'm there, he'll carve off a piece. I'm like the dog. He gives me a little piece to taste to go through, and curried fruit. But I'm including them here too, not only because of their culinary finesse and ability, but also a funny story about Easter. Many years ago, they gave a party. It was an engagement party for two very dear friends. And it was a typical Savannah party with beef tenderloin, shrimp cocktail, open bar, and all these lovely food, tomato sandwiches and such. Well, when people arrived, they noticed on the sideboard over there was a bunch of Easter baskets, and there wasn't anything in them. And Barbara and Carter alluded to the fact there was going to be an Easter hunt. And people were like, really? They're going to make us go out in the yard and hunt Easter eggs? We're all dressed and up and be out on the lawn. Well, they finally shared with them after a while the fact that they weren't going to be hunting for Easter eggs. They were going to be hunting for 200 mini bottles of alcohol that were hidden within the camellias and boxwoods and liriope in the yard. And so people, they perked up after that and liked that a good bit. Here are three of my favorites during Easter. Deviled eggs. I love a good deviled egg. People mess with them now, folks. You go to some of these restaurants and places, and they're trying to take them on this fusion world trip. And I've never liked those abroad places that they've done it. You know, don't put truffle oil in my deviled eggs, please. I want them like my mother made it, with good mayonnaise, yellow mustard, some sweet pickles, black pepper, and if you want to fancy it up, you put some paprika on top. How many of y'all own a deviled egg plate? Let me see a show of hands. How many of you own more than one? How many of you own more than two? There you go. I love it. This is great. Yeah, absolutely. So you are a true Southern cook with that. Don't laugh. People, they make fun of congealed salads. I'm sorry, I just love it. This is a strawberry pretzel congealed salad. It's fabulous. And if any of us, and you know, something that's more just about as irritating as anything to me is a food snob. I'm sorry. I mean, you know, I've eaten in some of the best restaurants in the world, going all this place, but if the food is good, it's just good, plain. So, and this is one of them. The bottom is, you've got the malty, crunchy, salty taste of the pretzel with brown sugar and butter, and then you've got cream cheese and cream in the middle, and fresh strawberries, and strawberry jello on top, yes, but I love that stuff. And this is a pea and asparagus casserole my mother made growing up. It's very near and dear to my heart. Asparagus we didn't grow, and if we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it hardly. It came out of can. It was out of the LeSueur can, and it was expensive. So I mean, when we would have it at Easter and maybe at Christmas or Thanksgiving. But the recipe I have in here, you make your own bechamel sauce. It's fresh asparagus and frozen English peas, and the cracker crumb topping that's buttered. Let me give you a hint on doing buttered topping for your casseroles. You know, a lot of recipes say place the cracker crumbs on top and drizzle butter. Don't do that, because the butter doesn't get all over your cracker crumbs. So put them in the food processor, get them pureed and done, and then drizzle the olive oil or the butter in there, and it coats everything. Or if you don't want to do that, put them in a plastic bag, get your rolling pin out, do it, then pour it in there, shake, 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 shake your booty, and then pour it over the top, and then you get it. Also, very special time for me, Easter, is with my family. This is my Aunt Ida Pauline on the left, on the banks of the Ocmulgee River in 1918. She lived to be 108. Every year, every single year, my daddy's birthday and at Easter, she brought us a coconut cake. And that coconut cake was fabulous. It was your basic 1, 2, 3, 4 cake, which is named for the proportions of what goes in there. You have a cup of butter, 2 cups of sugar, 3 cups of flour, and 4 eggs. That's not difficult to make. That 7-minute frosting, though, that goes on there. How many of y'all make 7-minute frosting? Well, I admire you. And it's like, I will not do it. I can't do it. Just won't. Not so. I depend the kindness of other bakers to do that for me. But it is wonderful and fabulous. My Aunt Lil's on the right there with her daughter, my first cousin Joyce, and she was known for her lemon jello cake that she made each year, which was really fabulous. And you see a picture of that cake that I made that's on our kitchen counter, and the cake plate and pan were my Aunt Ida Pauline's, and so which is tremendous. Let's go on to summer holiday recipes and such. So you see a lot of different ones that I have here featured. Pimento cheese. Don't ever make your pimento cheese out of pre-shredded cheese out of a bag that's covered with cellulose. You won't absorb all the mayonnaise and the flavors that are in there. Shred your own cheese or just don't make it. Go buy palmetto cheese. You know, the layered salad, barbecued ribs, some wonderful, wonderful things that are here. These are my ribs that I cook. Fall off the bone. They're fantastic. They're easy to do. And you don't have to have a big green egg and spend $3,000 to cook decent ones. The tomato pie on the right, I dearly love, and I was able to get a secret of making this tomato pie, tomato tart, from a wonderful lady here in Savannah many years ago, Cornelia Groves. And what she told me is, she said, take your pastry dough and brush it with Dijon mustard, just a light brushing of Dijon mustard on there. And please you'll look at a lot of tomato pie recipes, you all, and it's more like mayonnaise pie. I mean, there's a lot of mayonnaise in this one that I have. I mix a little mayonnaise, a little olive oil, lightly brush it. It has shredded Parmesan cheese and fresh thyme, and that's really it. Now, I do confess that I use Pillsbury rollout pie crust. I work. I don't have that much time to cook always, and it's perfectly good. Those really are. Now, we see a photo here of my friend Pat Conroy and his lovely wife, Cassandra King, who Cassandra did the forward to Cook and Celebrate. So I was very, very pleased. And I was very, very fortunate to have met him and been around him several times over the years before he passed away. He dearly loved pickled shrimp. And he was quoted as saying, when a good friend dies, I take 2 pounds of pickled shrimp. When a great friend dies, I take 5 pounds. When I die, I fully expect all the shrimp in Beaufort to be pickled that day. So we have this, Cassandra shared the recipe with me, but she also put a note on there, and she says, I always told Pat, I put in a little sprinkle of sugar and it's better. So anyway, I was able to go to his memorial service at the Beaufort Yacht Club, and there were dozens and dozens. There were 21 bowls there of pickled shrimp, and there probably wasn't a single solitary shrimp to be found off the coast of Beaufort that day. How about Halloween? This is our old house here in Savannah. It isn't haunted, or maybe, I don't know, maybe we left some ghosts. But we had a tradition of inviting people over. I would make the main course and have open bar, and then we would line up. You can see the steps on both sides. People would be lined up with chairs all the way up one side, across the porch, and down the other. They'd bring their own candy and bring an hors d'oeuvre, and we would celebrate. This is from Halloween. Yeah, that is a lampshade on Tom's head, and it did work. You just had to pull the tassel, and so here's some of the recipes that you'll find. Sesame toasted crab roll-ups from my friend Lisa White, which are magnificent and fabulous, and you've got to read the story to get the good humor behind that too as well. I always made a pot of chili. It was one of my things. The secret of my chili, you all, in the recipes in there, of course, is just a little bit of unsweetened cocoa, and instead of any water that you place in it, use beef stock. It just adds a great depth to that. I won a chili cook-off contest just recently. There were only 5 entries, but I still came out on top. And I also have the crimping shrimp. Right? And I haven't been drinking yet. The crab, the crab and shrimp au gratin is from my dear friend Herb Traub that lived down the street from us, the owner of the world's famous Pirate's House. And he was 91 years old. He was born and died in the same bed in the same house. And his saying was he went to the very end. He said he'd rather wear out than rust out. All right, Christmas. And so can I have 5 more minutes? I can't do it in 3. Okay, y'all, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. Christmas, my favorite time of year. I start celebrating at Thanksgiving. When I'm putting the turkey in the oven, I'm singing to myself, "Come with thy long expected Jesus." And when I'm chopping up the desserts for the pecan pie bars, I'm humming "Joy to the World." So anyway, I've got wonderful recipes from here. There's one piece that I want to share. That's a vintage Christmas tree with all ornaments from my childhood. I keep in my kitchen. Mama making fruitcake cookies, the recipe in there, fabulous fruitcake cookies. And then Ochre Magazine just did an article on Cook and Celebrate. I was very pleased. It's this magnificent publication. It's what Garden and Gun really started out to be, which is really, truly Southern, and the recipes and the landscapes are fabulous. They asked me in here if I could leave people with one recipe to remember me by, what it would be, and I said it was my family's cornbread dressing, which was my grandmother's recipe, and my mother's, and I've not changed one ingredient, and you see that here. Use real cornbread, and you got to make your own chicken stock that's got some fat in it. You're only going to eat cornbread dressing once or twice a year, so go ahead and make it right when you do it. They said what was my favorite memory in the book, and it's of my friend Nella Maxwell's story of rushing home from school in the wintertime before Christmas to make divinity candy with her mother, and it had to be on the day, because the day was the cold day without any humidity. Today would be the day. Yesterday, that divinity would just have been a bunch of mess, so you wouldn't do it. I have New Year's Eve with a fabulous menu that's in there. My mother's oyster stew recipe is there. These 2 gentlemen have a fabulous house, as Carrie Pickard and Christopher Morris in Macon. It's adaptive reuse. It used to be the water plant in making. They know how to throw a party. Wonderful recipes that are in there. Oyster stew, big secret of that. Don't overcook your oysters. Once you overcook an oyster, there's nothing you can do with it but throw it down the drain. So, all right, I have another chapter of oyster roast, fish fries, shrimp bowls, wild game dinners. That's 5-pound bass caught last spring. And I was fishing for brim, y'all. I was fishing for just enough for me to to cook for supper. Anyway, but I caught this bass. I put her back. She was fabulous. Shrimp bowls, a wonderful thing that I have that they're in the book. This is my dear friend Amy Swan. She taught me how to do a shrimp bowl, and her secret was once you drain the ingredients from the shrimp boil, you pour melted butter and sprinkle it with Old Bay season, toss it, and it is just out of this world. And this is I dedicated the last book in her memory, and that was the dedication that I have. I'm going to pass by tailgate parties. That's a sweet potato pound cake. I'll tell you what, it's excellent and delicious and very, very good. Julia Child, I've got a chapter of Julia Child that's in the book where we all went to. Yeah, we had gone to see the movie Julie and Julia, and we all came back to the house, and I had fixed a buffet of Julia-inspired foods, and it was a lot of fun. We have a Christmas tea each year. I've got a recipe for scones. Scone is nothing more than a sweetened biscuit. Check Claridge's cookbook, and you'll see the recipe of what I'm talking about. Another chapter is To Dottie with Love. I lost another very dear friend of mine. She's on the right. That's at mine and Tom's wedding in New York City a number of years ago. Her crab and shrimp supremes, one of the most fabulous things that you ever can put in your mouth. It's a simple marinade that you marinate the crab and the shrimp with, drain it, and toss it with a little mayonnaise, serve it on shredded lettuce. It's wonderful. And a cucumber soup. You'll have to read the book and get the story because they're telling me I got to go. Okay, this is not me in a younger age. That's Robert Burns. And what I want to do is end my talk about New Year's Day because two reasons. The holiday traditions and food traditions to New Year's Day are the most stalwart and the most cemented of all that you see across the South. And that's Hoppin' John collards and cornbread. And, that all is supposed to mean prosperity, the green, the money from the collards, the pennies from the Hoppin' John, and the gold of the cornbread. Another little thing is you don't eat chicken or fowl on New Year's Day because chickens scratch backwards for their food. Put your fortune backwards. You eat pork because they root forward to get their food, and it makes you're forward. And then I had Robert Burns here because the last stanza of Auld Lang Syne, the whole poem that he had, it talks about old friends that come together to celebrate memories and food and love. And the last stanza really encapsulate all that I hope Cook and Celebrate will be to you. And there's a hand, my trusty friend, and give me a hand of thine, and we'll both take a goodwill draught for Auld Lang Syne. So, thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm really hungry. And Gail, I see you up there. We have lots of good ideas for our next wine dinner. It's like I'm buying this book as soon as I can get out of here. So we have time for a couple of questions. So can you talk loudly?
I can hear you.
I can talk loudly.
I'll repeat it.
Would you please pick a spice that you just love, that we're probably not using it? What should we do with it?
A spice that we don't use as much of and what we should do with it. I just don't use that many spices, ma'am. I'll be honest with you. I mean, garlic, black pepper, salt. I mean, unusual ones. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss with that one. Yeah, so I apologize. Okay, there's some that are out there that people talk about, like, well, no, I'm not even go there with that because it's like, sorry, I apologize. Any others? Oh.
I have a question.
Okay.
So you were talking about sitting on your front porch before dinner one night. If you could invite 3 people, who would you like to sit and chat with?
Oh, okay. Well, Okra Magazine asked me that question, but they said 10. And,
Okay.
But I told them that we were going to have to put a leaf on the table and pull up 2 more chairs, though, because I would invite all the relatives that helped raise me and that I love so much and no longer with us, and I would fix a buffet of all the favorite foods that they wanted, and that would be what I would do. Yes, ma'am.
I recently moved here, and I'm from California, and I only live in part of the year, so my suitcase always has all my produce and stuff. Where's your favorite place to buy produce or fish or meat? Because I'm a foodie and I like drive around like, where's the place?
Well, go to Davis Produce on your way out to Tybee, which is fantastic, and of course Russo Seafood here is excellent. They carry great fresh seafood, and I've been gone for a number of years now. So, if there's any other suggestions for local folks in the audience about fresh? Red and white. Oh yeah, red and white. Yes, and where's it? Oh, the farmers market, exactly. In Forsyth Park, you have to go there every Saturday. It's magnificent. And speaking of red and white, it's gotten fancy, y'all. I'm sorry. When I moved away, you get some good pork chops there and collards, and I came back and there was all sorts of sushi, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I'm going to do sushi from red and white, but I don't know. I'm sure it's probably good, but yeah, red and white's great. So, any others? Yes, ma'am.
I noticed a lot of your party has elaborate foods and recipes. What's your just go-to? It's a typical Thursday night. I've got half an hour. What do you do?
Oh, well, actually, I'll tell you, I cook a lot on Sundays in preparation for the rest of the week. But if I had to do just a short meal, it would be an omelet, probably, just a really lovely omelet. And if I had some greens, I'd do some greens where I'd throw some little potatoes in the oven and roast those, and that's a go-to. I'm getting older too, and I don't. A lot of these things that I did, I was a lot younger. I'm almost 60. So anyway, now I'm slowing down a little bit. So I can throw a pot of chili together though in half an hour if I have the ingredients at the house, and that's pretty good. And a good stew. So yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. What's your favorite way to prepare? Fried. Y'all, I've got a great story about that too. That was one of my favorite things that my mother would prepare when I was a child. And I was in Dalton, Georgia at a Meat and Three restaurant a while back. And it hadn't been too long after she had passed away. And they had fried okra. It was fabulous. It was a cornmeal with just a little bit of flour. It was crispy. It was excellent. And I finished my portion. The waitress came by and she says, can I get you something else? I said, no. I said, but I'll tell you, this is the best fried okra I've had since my mama died. And she said, baby, let me go get you some more. And so anyway, that was great. I also love it. Toss it with a little olive oil and black pepper and sea salt and put it on the grill. Oh, it's excellent. And grill it until it's just bright green and it's still crunchy. It is excellent. And then, of course, a lot of us like it with tomatoes and onions and served with rice, which is really good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And as you see the wonderful volunteers, don't forget to donate to the Yellow Bucket. And be sure to go and buy the books. I'm going over later today. They sound fabulous, so thank you.